needed, but most of those
Sorry
interventions were
about that,
granted.
Adam.
So,
I
and
didn't see you
if I
last until
remember
we
correctly,
get him
there's
back
about
in.
40 plus
And I tried to
interveners
switch
that
to
will be
bamboozle,
granted
but I couldn't do it. That's
intervention
solid
in
lock.
the case. Now, some of those have asked to intervene just
I
to monitor the
apologize
case,
for missing
but
some
some
of
of them
what he
have,
said.
a large majority of them have asked to intervene in the case and present evidence. And I think if you, once you see that order, if you look at those names, you'll find that there's a lot of interveners that are taking the same position that you've expressed here today. And so we're assuming that they'll be filing evidence and have expert witnesses or have witnesses that present those positions to the board.
For those that are interested in that intervention process, is it still possible to be an intervener?
Well, the date has passed, but you can always ask for the board to approve a late filed intervention, and the board's fairly liberal in allowing intervention. Though you can go to the board's website, and there is a, I think there's a form on there, right, that you can fill out, and then you have to file it through the board's electronic filing system. And then the board will rule on that.
So if I can follow that up, the scheduling order was filed, and not all of the company's paperwork was in before the intervention deadline was up. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Just making sure we're clear on that.
Right, well, and the process is, we need to know who the parties are and how many of them there are, because we, you know.
How can those parties know if they're an intervener if you haven't even had all the paperwork before you to give you what it is the case is that the company is laying before you? You see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, but we have the petition, and no offense, but everybody here knows what the case is about, where their line's going, and what the issues they have.
Yeah,
I mean,
if I might, and I am filed a petition to intervene the day after the procedural order went out, and I assume that I'll be
you'll be
granted that. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think it's legalese, but and I have kind of a legal background. It's very clear what the process was, and I commend you guys for doing that, because I filed an objection, I filed a petition to intervene, and then I filed 2 requests for decrees. One of them just today.
You must be Mr. LaSher. Yes,
Yes,
yeah, got it. Yeah, LaSher. I don't know how to say that.
LaSher.
LaSher, okay.
So, I commend you guys for that whole process, because it is very clear what you have to do. And I am a relatively, despite my shirt, my kid's going to Grinnell, but I'm a relatively conservative guy. But I have some really big concerns about this, and a lot of unanswered questions that for the board, which I assume will be answered potentially, but most of my questions were for the pipeline company, and I have not received one response from them at all, which has been very disappointing. And one thing that you don't, that people don't.
I'm just going to stop you there.
Sure.
We want to let you
Sure,
finish
yeah.
your,
Sorry.
and then we have a Q&A coming up right away, I promise.
Gotcha.
Okay, so, but there's kind of a follow-up on that, then the way the process works is these interveners will raise issues in their pre-filed testimony, and what we use at the board, which is a little different than court proceeding, is we require the interveners to file their witnesses' testimony ahead of time, so everybody knows what their positions is, and then we allow the other parties to respond to those in writing. So when it comes to the board has seen all of the arguments. It's not like you show up at the hearing and we don't know what we're going to hear. Another question?
We'll get to, I promise, we just want to let him finish talking.
Tom, we're going to proceed, is that okay?
I'm not going to wait so long.
Okay.
I'll hurry. Been here going on 2 hours. So.
Okay. Okay, so in that process, we go through that, we go to the hearing, those witnesses are sworn in, there's cross-examination, and then all of that evidence, along with the objections and all of the issues that's been presented, the board takes back and weighs it, and the statute gives them, tells them what the standard is, and it's not very specific, because it's promote the convenience and necessity, public convenience and necessity, and so the board has to weigh that, and as I said, they have a long history of balancing those kind of issues, and the process is, it's fair, and the board will weigh that testimony and weigh that evidence. Okay, now we go to him.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
How do I get to testify to the board?
You have to, you have to,
I'm just-
you have to intervene, you have to intervene.
So I have to do a lot of paperwork before I can just show up at the meeting.
You have to file one piece of paper and ask the board to be a party, and then you can file your testimony.
How much does it cost?
Nothing. You just have to be able to go on to the
I
website,
can't just show up and speak.
and no, you have to file pre-file testimony. We have
So
to
it's
see
not
what
really
your,
public- It's not really a public hearing.
no, it's not a public hearing, it's an evidentiary hearing. This is an evidentiary proceeding in which parties present their cases. It's the adversarial proceeding that throughout the whole nation's judicial process is adversarial. It's just like that, just like going to court, somebody sued you over running into them, it's the same kind of process.
Well, I talked to the utilities board before, and I just walked in, and I think I may have signed a piece of paper and put on the schedule, but I got 5 minutes. That's all there was to it.
And you were probably in a small proceeding in which there weren't very many parties.
This was ratepayer, Mid-American.
Right. And that's a consumer comment hearing in which we do just allow people to come in and speak. And we may have a day for that at this hearing. We haven't worked that out yet. But we haven't actually, we had to figure out how many interveners there are, and then we have to see the pre-file testimony. And then we may set a day aside for people to come in and make public comments.
So the answer is maybe.
Maybe.
We can't promise you.
We can't promise it now because, as you can see, I mean, with 40 interveners and with the length of the pipeline, it's going to be a long hearing.
Exactly.
Before we go on to questions, we had two specific demands, and those weren't addressed in what you just said, so I'm curious what your response is.
Well, the first one is, I think I was addressing that I think from the number of objections and from the number of people who are here that a lot of people who are interested in this pipeline have either filed objections or are following it closely.
If you have
And
questions
you know, we do have a process, we do
related
have an
to this
obligation to
pipeline
proceed with
proposal
the
or
petition that's been
the
filed. The
process,
statute requires us
post it in
to
the
review
chat, and
that
I'll
to
see if I can
determine
read it
whether
out
a
loud.
permit should be granted. And so that, I mean, we're kind of in that process. There are dates that have to be met, and if those dates are met, the hearing will occur sometime between November the 12th and December the 2nd. If those dates aren't met, the hearing may have to be moved. The process is, and we'll proceed, and those decisions will be made as it goes along. The decision about the permit is left up to the board, and that will happen after the evidentiary hearing, after the board's heard all the evidence and weighed all the evidence, and knowing this process, there will probably be briefs filed, so we're looking at, even if we held a hearing in late November, with 30-day briefs and responses, we're probably looking at least the first year before decisions are.
So could you tell us what exactly has the IUB done to get information about the process out to people in the countryside?
Well, the first thing is the informational meetings that are going on in each county. And
There were some folks who attended those, and I'm curious what someone thought of that informational meeting and how it went, and whether or not their concerns were addressed throughout that meeting.
Yeah, I was at the one in Jasper County and also the one up in Ankeny, and it was very much like this, a lot on process. But when it came down to what criteria do the board members use, what do they weigh when making their decision, there was no answer. It seems to me that once it gets past the process, it's a very arbitrary and capricious decision. There was no answer addressing what types of environmental information is used. We know that the state of Iowa does not require environmental impact statement. They don't have to. That's at a federal level. But one of my questions is, I know that there will be federal involvement, and that could very well trigger either an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, depending on how that decision is made by the federal agency. Why would the board make its decision in advance of receiving very valuable environmental impact information?
well,
It will be an undertaking for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They have to have permits to do the stream crossings. It will probably be a federal undertaking for the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have land that will be impacted. USDA also had, through the Farm Service Administration, they have several farms that will be impacted. So it looks to me, at some point, one of these federal agencies is gonna say, this is a federal undertaking for our agency. We are required by law to do an environmental impact assessment, and if the EA says we have to go one notch higher, we have to go to an EIS, and that weighs all of these questions. What happens not only to the environment, but to the social environment, to the landscape, all of those things are taken into consideration. Iowa does not have that level of environmental review. So my question is, what do the board members,
Well, they weigh what the, what the statute, gives them the authority to weigh. And what,
Which is asked backwards, it sounds like.
What is that?
well, and that's, does it meet the requirements of the rules with regard to, crossing the land restoration is the main thing that the statute provides. And the other things is issues raised by the parties in the case. And all these environmental issues we're assuming will be raised by some of the interveners. And then the board will have to address them. But our process is really separate from all of those federal processes.
I understand that, but why isn't the Iowa Utilities Board holding the applicant to the highest standard possible? And that could be best met by waiting until the federal actions have been defined and the NEPA laws kick in and the federal agencies say we need to have an environmental assessment or we need to have an environmental impact statement. It seems to me that the board's decision would be best informed after that information came out.
Well, the board doesn't really have any jurisdiction in those areas. I mean, and so the board is obligated just to apply the Iowa law as it is.
Which from an environmental standpoint is almost worthless. We do not have good environmental laws in the state of Iowa. And I know that that's out of the board's control.
But that doesn't preclude them from leading. That's the point you're trying to make. That doesn't, none of this precludes the board from leading the way.
Exactly, yes. There's nothing that says you can't take the environment into consideration.
That's right, and I said those interveners, if they file testimony about the environment, and the code of access will respond to it, and the board will have to weigh those issues. I mean, that's the process.
I've got a question
Okay,
for
just
each
a
of
second. We want to do this a little more orderly. So if I point to you, please stand up and ask your question. Jess, go ahead.
I have a question I'd like each one of you to answer, and that question is, do you think this pipeline is going to spill?
I really don't have, I'm not allowed to have an opinion.
No, but I want
I'm not allowed to, that's not my job.
I'm not asking
And I
your
won't
opinion of
answer
whether or
those
not this
kind of
pipeline should be
questions.
filled. I'm
Those are
asking you if you
inappropriate
think
questions.
it will spill.
Those are inappropriate questions for a person in my position.
That's a simple question. I have,
No, it's
as
not.
the right of a citizen, I have a right to know whether you think this pipeline is going to spill or not. What's your answer?
I can't give anything different. That's the kind of question we cannot answer.
Is your answer?
I concur.
You gotta understand that these people represent the Iowa Utilities Board, what they say and what they feel. Personally, they have to keep to themselves.
Okay, Dan, you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to just ask a question. How do you fit into the eminent domain decision?
Okay, what the statute allows is, if the permit is granted, that the company who gets the permit, code of access, would be allowed to exercise the right of domain, eminent domain, under the conditions or as prescribed by the board. Now, those of you who are familiar with other pipelines or transmission lines know that the board, if they think that the eminent domain is not right for that property, they can have it moved, they can modify the width of the easement, but the statute itself gives the company, if they are granted the permit, the right of eminent domain. And I understand it's a legal issue that has been raised, and it will be raised, I'm sure, by the interveners in the case, and it's a legal issue the board will have to decide. But the statute, it says what it says. And so whether that applies to the code of access is an issue that has been raised and will probably be raised, and the board will have to address.
Mary?
Yeah, I have a question. You said, if this is right, let me know. If it's not right, let me know. You said you were weighing the balance between and considering public convenience and public necessity. Now, doesn't that public necessity involve environmental pollutions, environmental catastrophes, possibilities, percentages of possibilities for catastrophes? And public convenience, wouldn't that be coming through somebody's land that destroys their right to farm and continue their generational farm? And that, isn't that what you're weighing, or did I hear that wrong?
Well, and that is one side of it. That's part of the balancing. I mean, the board will look at those, and as I said, it's been
So
raised
then the
objection.
environmental effect goes into that balancing with the public necessity and public convenience. That affects that the environmental effect has to be brought into those two factors,
Yeah, but
or
there-
otherwise it's not a balance.
But there is a position on the other side that the board doesn't have the authority to go very far in that direction. And so that's the decision the board will have to make. And we're assuming there will be testimony on both sides about
So that's not considering the public necessity or the public convenience then?
Well, it is considering it, it's just.
But it's just saying, oh, well, we're going to put the pipeline in anyway, regardless of public necessity or public convenience.
That's not what I said, and that's not what the board said. I said we would
You're
back.
weighing it, but I don't see what the part is for the affirmative part is for the public convenience and public
only
necessity.
go
The
so
parties
far
will
with
bring
the
that evidence
balance.
into the record. I mean, that's the whole process is, you know.
Okay, there's a lady beside Susie. That's you. Could you stand up, please?
Go ahead and go, Nathan, because I forgot what I
I
got
was just
wrapped
going
up.
to ask, Eric, Dan, I know that you maybe had a good, easier time navigating the process, but I don't think that reflects everyone else's experience here in the audience. Not all of us have had an easy time at that. But my question is, you know, we aren't dense, we aren't stupid here. We understand that you have limited ability to make these sort of decisions when it comes to our demands. My question for you is, how do we know that you've taken our demands to the board members? What sort of follow-through can we have from you three moving forward? And how do we know that we're actually being heard?
Well, on a personal note, okay, I've been doing this a long time. I did it at the Missouri Public Service Commission, and my job is to bring all of the issues and all the positions and to the board so that they can make a decision. But the other way you will know is, when the order comes out, you should see a discussion of almost all of the issues raised by the parties in their testimony. So hopefully that order will show you that the process and the weighing of the evidence has been.
So we have to wait for the decision to be made.
Well, in terms of your demands today, particularly the one that we continue the hearing or extend the process out, I have to tell you, you're not going to like this, but we're not going to take that back to the board because we're not your advocates. We work for the board. That's who we advocate for. And for us to carry the message
How does Dakota get access to the board?
by filing things.
Well,
They're
why-
a party.
so we
And
can
so
file.
CCI is a party.
We will file it. This
That's-
will be
and that's
filed.
what I'm getting to.
Like I said, we're
And
not
so-
dense, we understand
Yeah,
that.
and so I just wanted to be clear with everybody. You file that motion to extend the hearing, Dakota Access is going to get to respond. All the interveners are going to get to respond. We support it, we're against it, whatever it is, and the board will consider the arguments that are made and make a decision on whether that case is going to get
People
suspended
can
or going
still
forward.
file an objection, correct?
Yes,
So
correct.
how can those objectors have their voices heard if the scheduling deadline has already passed for being an intervener?
The objections and the interventions are different.
But for
Objections
the
are from
objection
anyone
to
in the
be-
public.
For the objection to be addressed at the quasi-judicial proceeding, you have to be an intervener.
No,
Somebody who hasn't objected yet
No,
is
no,
not
no.
able to do that.
No. The objections are all bundled together. We're reading them as they come in. I assume Dakota Access is reading them as they come in. And they will be expected to address the issues that are raised in those objections in their testimony when they file it. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go through and start with the A's and work their way down all the way to the Z's of all the objections and take them one at a time. Realistically, in a case this size, they're going to have to group them some and say, a lot of people have raised these environmental issues, here's whatever they have to say about it. A lot of people have raised these leak issues, here's whatever they're going to say about it. And that's all going to be pre-filed with the board, and then the board is going to get to turn around, or not the board, excuse me, the other parties get to turn around and file a testimony in response to that, take issue with it, decide what they agree with, what they don't agree with. Then it all goes to hearing, it gets turned into exhibits at the hearing, and we go straight into cross-examination of those witnesses on all those issues. But they will have to address them, and in fact, I don't know if it's going to work this time, but in a more smaller proceeding, we usually require that they file written responses to everything that's filed up to 7 days before the hearing. I don't know if that'll work this time, but we'll figure something out. And then anything that comes in after that, they have to respond to live at the hearing. We're really going to try and limit the live testimony at this one, I think. At least that's if it were up to me, and it isn't, but if it were. Because I'm not the board member. I only advise them. They'll make that decision. So I'm telling you.
Why would you want to limit the time? Okay, we have a couple of
Because
other
we're
questions.
going to be time constrained.
We have a
This is an
question.
important issue, as long as it takes, we need that time.
We have a question here and a question there, but I have one question before. You said you don't work for us. If you don't work for us, who the hell do you work for?
The IUB Board.
And who do
And
they
who
work
do they
for?
work
And they work for you. But there's, if you don't see, no, seriously.
That's a very,
They're like a judge. I'm like a clerk. I work for that judge, and that judge can't take sides on a case before it's filed.
You advise them.
that sounds like
That's-
parsing, but nonetheless.
It sounds like what it is.
So, Derek, sir?
This board that you're speaking about that's gonna make this decision, they're appointed, aren't they? And this is a political circus then, is what you're saying, right? Because they're appointed by Branstad, and they're gonna do what he says, or he'll fire him. That's right. Because he's already done it once, he's proven himself. He's a bully.
I have a question.
Okay, right here in the green, and then Bill.
I'm
Start with your names.
Start with your name,
Oh,
say your name.
Deb Marlin. I'm not a member of CCI, and I'm just here as a concerned citizen, and it really, really troubles me here. So I'm wondering, first of all, who pays your salary?
The state.
The state of Iowa.
Would you repeat the
Okay.
question?
Who pays for their salary? And you just said that the state of Iowa does. Well, if there's, let's say if somebody's being prosecuted, there's the public defender, public prosecutor. Who is our public defender?
That's right.
Who is paid by the state of Iowa to represent the citizens? So that's one thing. So that's one thing. Okay, so that's one question. The second question is, I see that you've had community meetings and you've had them along the pipeline. I don't live along the pipeline route. I live live here in West Des Moines. I have a business in Southwest Iowa. The majority of people in Iowa do not know about the pipeline. If there is an environmental disaster that's going to affect all of Iowa. That's right. Why is it that not all of Iowa is being informed about this? I tell you what, even though those counties are not being affected by their land being taken, they would be concerned. We need to have them also educated. You've had the meetings in the other counties, have them in the rest of the counties. It's not due diligence to educate the entire public. That's right.
Okay, Bill?
I'd like both of those questions answered. Like both of you, please.
Sorry. What was it? No offense, but sir.
All right, how do we get public assistance to defend the public?
Who represents us? Yeah.
Well, the only state agency that represents consumers in general is the Office of Consumer Advocate. And you might contact them and see if they're taking a position and what position.
And public funds are available to fight?
If you call them, they have attorneys and they appear before the board in other cases.
I'm sorry, who is this again? The Office of who?
Office of Consumer Advocate.
And so will the board allow the time to be extended so that a state agency could defend the public?
Well, they're already interveners, they're parties to the case. So all you have to do is call them and see if they will, present your position. If not, you can file personally and intervene and participate as
And then what about educating the rest of Iowa?
I mean, I think, the process is already said, if you think that that's important, I think it's a recommendation. And like I said, I think it's a recommendation you need to file with the board and ask them to do that.
If there's an environmental disaster, it would be affecting the entire state of Iowa.
We have that
I understand your point, but I think the board operates through its orders, and the way they issue orders is people file pleadings with them, asking them to do something. So if you want the board to respond, you need to file in the case.
You're talking about necessity, but the number one necessity that you need to consider is protecting the state of Iowa. That's right.
That's right. CCI is intervening on behalf of our members.
Yay.
So that is another way that you can be represented in this process.
Okay, Bill, and then Chris, and then the fellow in the yellow shirt, and beyond there waving your arm. So go ahead.
I'm Bill Alexander. I'd like to know the proper procedure that the landowners were notified about the informational meetings, what the code states about that, and how that was presented to the landowners. What does the code really state? How are they notified?
They're being.
Okay, I'm just curious on that.
Who's looking at me? No, I'm trying not to.
The code requires, and the board's rules require, that specific notice be sent to each landowner in a corridor where the pipeline may be, where the route of the pipeline may be located. And so everyone in those corridors, in those counties, should have received specific notice.
I did not receive one. Period. We only found out through other folks.
What does the code state, that how is it supposed to be directed to those landowners, the code of Iowa?
By certified mail, I think. Isn't that right? In the
Restricted.
Restricted.
Restricted mail, yeah, restricted.
What happened? Restricted says that only that party that's named on that or that address will be the one that can sign off on it. As far as I know, I don't think there was, I know from our case, it was never sent out restricted.
Certified mail return receipt request.
That's exactly right, but the code of Iowa says restricted.
That's going to be an issue.
Why didn't the Iowa Utilities Board just jump on that immediately? I mean, they knew exactly after the comment was made about that, there was, it went out certified.
Chris?
For those of us who have filed to intervene and we're not attorneys, you mentioned expert testimony. Could you say more about the type of evidence that should be presented?
Well, for an individual who's representing themselves, I think they really just need to present what they consider to be the issues and explain why they think whatever position they're taking should be adopted. You don't necessarily have to be an expert witness, but all you have to do is explain your position, state what your position is, state what you want the board to do, and explain why you want them to do it.
Fellow in the yellow shirt?
Yes, my name
Could you
is
stand?
Joe Reuter, and we have farmland in Boone County. Also, I'm a registered professional civil engineer in Iowa and Kansas. Now, your technical people, you have a technical staff that's looking at the plans that you're getting, is that right?
That's correct.
Are they registered professional engineers?
Yes.
Okay, can I talk to them, or can I only do this through intervening?
No, you can talk.
I have safety concerns, a lot of them, big concerns.
I mean, you can talk to them. I mean, I think, our staff engineers will be presenting a report, and it's on the procedure schedule. I don't remember the exact day, but they will be filing a report which explains what they found when they reviewed the petition. And so if you want to call and ask them.
So if I call Jane, and Jane has been very helpful in your organization, she's very helpful, I should just be able to ask her that tell her that I would like to speak to the professional engineers who are reviewing the plans.
I think that's all you
And
need
she'll
to do.
take care of me, right?
She'll take care of you.
Okay.
Jane will take care of you.
Right, one other quick question, since you two, I don't know about the third one, but I know you two are attorneys. What about this LCC arrangement? That looks like that's something you set up for failure.
Right.
Usually used by small companies so that they don't lose all of the family assets. But here we have, what's his name, Kelsey Warren. Why does he want to have an LCC? Is
You
he
mean
hoping to bail
LLC?
out?
LLC.
LLC, excuse me. I'm kind of curious from a legal standpoint.
I will.
Well, it's a legal issue, and if somebody wants to raise it, they can, but I can't give you an answer now why they went to LLC, because only they know.
Okay.
It limits, what it does, sir, is it limits their liability.
I know.
It's to cover their
He knows.
Okay, we have another, somebody in the back there had a question?
Sandy Easter, what interests are the board balancing? Islands, health, safety, future, clean air, soil that we can use to grow and have an economy, our children and grandchildren versus an out-of-state corporation. I don't think these two things balance.
Right.
No
They
way.
shouldn't.
Where's the public good? Okay, is there anybody who hasn't said anything
I
that
have
wants to
one
talk?
other question, please.
Okay, quick, go ahead.
Do you guys have errors and omissions insurance? Are you legally liable for the advice that you give this work? You're not.
Not if we
legally
give in
liable?
good faith, we
You're
give
not
our
legally
advice to the
liable?
board under the statute, we're not.
So you can advise them and not be held responsible or accountable for the
In our
advice
jobs,
that
we
you
would
give?
be held responsible.
In your legal responsibility?
Yes.
I got a follow-up question on Joe's question about the engineering plans. Is that considered proprietary under chapter 22?
I don't think so. I mean, it's in EFS. What the petition and all of the supporting documentation is in EFS, the electronic filing system. I know there's a lot, because of all the objections, there's a lot of documents in there, but I think if you go through, you'll find all of the information that Dakota Access has filed.
Okay, we have time we can do yours and Ross's. And then
Okay, I have a question regarding other pipelines coming through. Is there anywhere where we can find out what pipelines have been proposed that have actually been denied versus the ones that are approved, so we have any kind of understanding as to what historical decisions were made, so we know we can weigh that into what the likelihood is of this going through or not?
Well, we can find easily those that we've granted. Now, for those that were denied, I think, it would take a little more digging. I don't know how easy that is to find that information, because those they would not have permits and they would have gone away, and so it'd have to go back to either go through the paper records or, talk to one of our engineers who's been here a long time and ask them. I think if you have that question, you can, send it in through the customer, what do you call that? The help desk.
They can go through the EFS help desk, or they can go through IUB customer service email.
Right, either one, and ask that question, and we'll see what we can do. Like I said, it may be difficult to find the negative, those that didn't get it.
Ross?
Earlier I asked it, but I'm gonna ask it again. You probably can't give an answer, but it doesn't matter. Given that Iowa code is already not being followed, and given that there's a farm field outside of Newton, Iowa, where there's pipes sitting on the ground, is ETP arrogant, or is the IUB in the bag for ETP?
Well,
it really needs, the question needs answered.
Yeah, and I apologize, I was gonna answer that, and we kind of got off on something else. Those are really business decisions that they make, and I can't.
The violation of Iowa code is a business decision they make?
I think they, no offense, but they can, if they lease property and buy pipe, they can stick it anywhere they want to. I mean, it's a business decision. It has really no effect.
That is a business decision. The decision not to follow procedural code of Iowa is something entirely different.
It's a legal decision, which was presented to the board and the board ruled.
Will arrogance be one of the things you weigh?
I'm sorry, did the board rule then that certified mail was
Was
okay.
sufficient.
Was sufficient.
Because the certified mail language is in the other two statutes, where the franchise statute and the natural gas pipeline statute.
So that somebody who wants, I mean, potentially if the eminent domain is granted, take the worst case.
It's an issue that's sitting out there.
But that's one thing I could bring up in my lawsuit to stop the eminent domain process.
I mean, I can't advise you, but.
No, but I'm just stating
Right.
for it.
It is an issue.
That's great, I appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, that brings to a close our Q&A, and thank you very much.
Again, I apologize for the numerous interruptions. I don't know if it's my phone is overheating or I'm just having signal losses or what, but
Okay, so
I probably captured about
come to
90% of
closing,
it.
and I'm going to finish by reiterating what our speakers said tonight, and briefly the reasons why the Bakken pipeline proposal is not a good fit for Iowans. And I'll just give credit where credit was due. This was originally written by Angie Carter, who is one of the spearheads for the Bakken Pipeline Coalition, the Resistance. So I know many of you know her and admire her. So let me begin. The first, Energy Transfer Partners would be allowed to abuse eminent domain if granted a permit by the IUB. Eminent domain is intended to be used when a project is in a public interest. It was first used to bring electricity and telephone service to rural Iowa, which, was a public service. The Bakken oil piped through Iowa will not be produced or consumed by Iowans. It's all going south to be refined and exported. Therefore, it's not an Iowa utility.
Sorry.
Secondly, Iowans take all the risks because leaks are inevitable.
Sorry, just taking a drink.
There have been at least 139 known leaks in North Dakota since 2012. That's 139. The governor of Montana declared an emergency last January when 50,400 gallons of Bakken crude contaminated the land and water of the Yellowstone River. He was forced to issue a no-drink order. Now, we're kind of familiar with that here in Iowa already, but do we want more?
Nope.
Our rich Iowa soil will be degraded and our drinking water even further threatened. The pipeline crosses every major watershed in Iowa. Our waterways are currently experiencing unprecedented degradation because of massive manure spills and toxic runoff from fields. We do not need one more added pressure. Number 3, the promised employment benefit during the building phase of the pipeline will provide approximately, and this is an upper limit estimate, 2,000 temporary jobs. Now, I've been in several meetings listening to the ETP guys, and every time we go to the next meeting, the number grows. It's amazing. But going with their first estimate, they said about 1,200. Not all of those would be guaranteed for Iowa workers. The permanent jobs, again, an upper limit estimate is 35. At the first meeting, they said approximately 15. And they said not one of those jobs would be guaranteed to Iowans because they required a certain expertise, which apparently we don't have. According to the EPC, oh my God, I'm speaking there. ETP, let's not go there. None of those jobs will go to Iowans. So, and then lastly, little discussed has been the social cost of the influx of temporary workers. And one need look no further than North Dakota to see this. The reports from communities up there that have absorbed the trend find that it is a boon to local hotels, bars, and other retailers temporarily. However, the amount of drug abuse, domestic abuse, assault of women, human trafficking, and prostitution rises and virtually mitigates any other benefit to the community. So let me finish by saying that the proposed Bakken pipeline, again, it's not a public utility. Unless there's a spigot somewhere on that thing, it has absolutely no benefit to Iowans. It is literally all risk and no reward. Citizens of this state have filed over 3,000 objections to the pipeline. 500 letters of support for opposition have been sent to the IUB. Clearly, this demonstrates that Iowans are not willing to assume that risk. You need to listen to what you're hearing, what you're being told. It's a clear message. You get to decide what evidence is presented to the IUB members. You play a very important role, even though you say we're not your bosses. You play a really important role in determining whether this pipeline is constructed. We need you, and we implore you to be responsive to the message everyday Iowans are sending. No Bakken pipeline. So we'd like to thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
These are always challenging, but they're also very interesting, so appreciate it.
You want to talk some next steps real quick?
We'll get out of here.
Supposed to be enlightened. Oh, you're inspired and enlightened.
Okay, we want everyone to stay for a little while, because we're just going to talk about what transpired, if you have any questions, and we have the CCI staff has some things they want to share with you.
Yeah. So I can go. I'm feeling frustrated. I don't know about you all.
Yes.
Who does he work for? Who is he an advocate for? Not for us. That was the answer we got. And that's not right. We have a few folks. I was thinking the leaders who led us through this might provide like some of their reflections, their frustrations from the meeting, just so we can talk about that. But after that, I have some next steps for you all, and Hugh is going to talk about CCI and membership.
It'll be exciting and fun, so don't go anywhere.
So I don't know if Debbie sort of did hers. Ross, do you have something, reflection?
I'd like to turn it over to a landowner who's directly affected and hear what they have to say. If there's any landowner that wants to give their impression of what they heard.
Well, I'm a landowner and also a professional too. In this thing.
I am as well.
Yeah.
And
thank you both for being here.
He was talking.
Yeah, I'm still talking.
Let Joe.
Yeah. It just sounds like we're getting a lot of lip service here, because for weeks I've been trying to get a hold of the guy down in Kansas City who is the DOT pipeline inspector. He's the region guy, and he may be the only guy. For weeks I've been trying to get off, because I had a couple of questions. What happened out in Santa Barbara? Well, he doesn't really know, and he may not know. He's probably just a one-man office. But this whole thing is of pipeline safety is really very concerned to me. I don't think this industry really has a real handle on this, and I don't think they should be building anything if they can't build it safely.
I'm a landowner, and there's one thing that bothers me about this whole thing. What's the hurry? And I'll say this from my experience. I work with the legislature every day when it's in session, but it's to help veterans with benefits. We had a file, Senate File 506, that was starting to make some gain. Senate File 506, I don't have it in front of me, but Senate File 506 limits them to what they can do. For example, it might limit them, instead of, 150 feet? Isn't that the total the amount?
Yeah.
It limits them to, say, 75 feet. It limits them to a 12-inch pipe instead of it limits them to the point where this is not a productive thing to do. And we were making gains on that, and we were getting some legislatures to get behind us on it, but the session closed before we got that done. I would like to see the extension done, and I didn't want to bring it up while they were here, but I'd like to see the extension done where this fits into the legislature in January the 22nd, when it starts up, and we will refire. When you open a Senate file, it's still open. So it's very easy to bring it back up, and we have some senators and representatives down there that are for us. And I think we were making a lot of gains, but then the session had to close, and it wasn't one that went forward. So it'd be nice if we could get that extended, Because if we can get the legislature to change the code, that would shut them down. It would shut them down. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So do you need a lot of people when you reopen it, like a mass of people down there?
Yes,
Okay, let us know.
we will. We will.
Are there any of those senators and representatives that are interveners?
Yes.
Are there?
Yes.
There was one, a guy, I think his name is Kaufman, I don't know if you know that. He was extremely vocal and he's extremely supportive. And he's so passionate, they have to kind of calm him down. And it's all about eminent domain. He has nothing to do with anything else, nothing to do with the oil. It's just, it's your right to do what you can with your own land without a private corporation coming in and taking that from you to make profit for themselves.
Is it just the one?
No.
He was 12 or 13.
Yeah, there's 12 or 13, but again, we were just starting to make the gains. Remember, this session went way beyond, and certain things aren't going to go, and this got closed because it wasn't getting there yet. But we made tremendous gains in the time we did it. So it's just a matter of extending this and getting this back in front of the legislature, and if we can change the code, we can shut them down. That simple.
Awesome.
Yes.
How early would we have to start working on that?
I don't think it's going to take much at all because Senate File 506 still it exists. It didn't get voted down. It just got
tabled.
It got good.
But
you got a better word now. You got tabled.
Right?
There's a lot of other ways we can also stop this. Like we want to pursue legislative strategy, but we want to do other things too. So I just for the sake of time.
Protest
No,
march?
he had to say that first.
I'm sorry. Yeah. First of all, I want to tell y'all that these guys up here, they're not the decision makers, and they're the guys to ensure that the process, for them right now, this is about the process. I understand, I also work in a similar capacity, and I understand where their position, where they're coming from, and what they can and can't say in a public forum. Here they're representing the state of Iowa Utility Board. He was absolutely right when he said that was an inappropriate question because that calls for a personal opinion. When you work for a government entity and when you're representing a government entity in a meeting like this, you cannot express a personal opinion.
So we understand all of that,
There may be
but
inappropriate answers, but there are no inappropriate questions.
the government works for us, though.
But
I think that's the bedrock issue here. The government works for us, and we know there's logistical concerns.
But these guys also have superiors that they have to answer to, and they have restrictions within their jobs.
And we're going to push those.
Do you think if
Well,
they were
they-
scared about being legally liable for their advice, that they would be?
We understand. We understand
That's
that.
very important.
If I were in a situation similar to this in my professional capacity, I would have acted the same way that those guys did. What they were doing, they were addressing problems.
I think what I got from this conversation we had is that a real big sticking point is there's really going to be nothing done about environmental impact by these guys. And that somehow I think we got to play with that, how it's so ridiculous to make this decision without an environmental impact. Everybody here's talking about the impact on the environment.
Well, the feds come
And so,
anytime.
and so I think we got to play with that, about how we can use that to say it's ridiculous for them to make a decision on this without an environmental impact. I don't care what the law says they can or cannot or won't do. It's still ridiculous. We got to deal with that. We got to use that. I think we should run with those. That's one of the things we need to run with to tell the world these guys are talking about run without even thinking about the environment. It's ridiculous.
If you want an environmental impact statement or an EA done, you got to talk to the Corps of Engineers, you got to talk to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and USDA. EAs and EISs are a federal process. They aren't state.
Yeah, that's fine. Then we got to get them to do it. What I'm using as an organizing, what I'm talking about is not lawyership. I'm talking about how to organize it for the people to see how it's so unfair. That's what I'm talking about. We got to get the state of Iowa to see how unfair it is the thing that's going to really ruin our environment, they're not even going to talk about the environment. We got to talk, we got to use that publicly, get it out to every damn newspaper and the media. We got to talk about that you do it legalese, right or wrong. That's just
Okay, we have time for two more. I'd say back there and then Sandra.
I was just going to say, I went on a protest against the Keystone Pipeline up in St. Paul. There were over 5,000 people there.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that here?
right.
You know, so that's one way of bringing knowledge and at least letting people know it's happening, what's happening. You
The
know,
thing that's slowing Keystone down is the EIS. That is a federal action, it's an international pipeline.
I'm saying a protest march would be one way of making Iowans aware of what's happening.
Yes.
Okay,
That's it.
in the back.
Well, someone said, why are they in such a hurry? Because they don't want the legislature in session before the
That's
decision.
exactly right.
Now, this hearing is when? November?
November, early December.
Okay, so they go, they've already made their mind up anyway. What's going to happen is they go to that. Oh, well, we made our decision. Legislatures is still a month away, and they've already done it.
Can the Fed slow them down, though?
But see, that's why we got to slow them down. And I think even the governor made the statement, he didn't want the legislature making this decision.
Right, exactly.
The legislature is us. Those are our people, those are the ones that can make that decision.
Nathan, are the Feds engaged in this? And is that process?
Today, no.
Should we be doing that? Should this group be talking about approaching the Feds?
We have a lot of different plans for exactly that. We don't unfortunately have the time to talk about it right now, but we'll get there. What I will say is I have a couple immediate action steps that I think you all can take. One is objections. I have a bunch of them here. You can each take 5 to 10, and get other people who haven't heard about this yet to sign them and mail them back to us. We'll take them to the utilities board. Another thing, how you're feeling right now, if you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling angry, write that down, 250 words, and get it in your local paper. We really need that. So I'll pass these around. We don't have time for questions, I'm sorry, but we can.
Not a question. Yeah, don't go, no.
Not a question.
Do
you want to say something about?
Just hang around, 8 more minutes.
My mother is at home. She's got dementia.
Do you want to say something about Story County Soil and Water Conservation District and what they're up to?
Yeah, so the Story County Soil and Water Commission passed a resolution against the pipeline.
Yes.
So there's some good traction there. We're working in other counties to do the same and pass resolutions. So that's another way we're going to stop this thing. But I encourage you all to get involved in things like that. So just reach out to us. We have those opportunities. But we do not have time for questions.
For folks that have other, well, I think for folks that have other questions or thoughts, it's like talk to Nathan, talk to
hang
me.
around.
After the meeting, it's like, we're not going anywhere. We want to, for folks that do gotta go, we got one more thing we gotta do.
Ready? All right. Hey, thanks everybody. I think my name is Hugh Westby. I'm the executive director of Iowa CCI. I've been with CCI since 1979. I want to introduce Joe Fagan. Here, Joe. When did you start with CCI?
1975.
Joe helped start CCI 40 years ago. This is our 40th birthday. We would not be in this room tonight if it was not for Joe. Joe was a priest at that time. Luann was a nun, but they're not nuns and priests now. Sorry. That's not legal, is it? Or I don't know what it is. It's legal. It's right. It's the right thing to do. But Joe and 3 other priests, he was a priest, started CCI in Waterloo 40 years ago. And without their drive and grit and determination, we would not be in this room tonight fighting like hell to win, fight like hell for justice and democracy. Thank you, Joe. That same fighting spirit we carry into every fight. In fact, every time we step into the public arena to fight for justice, you know who we fight? Corporate power. Corporate power, whether it's big oil, whether it's big insurance companies, whether it's big banks, or big ag. Corporate power. Corporate power wants